Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be doing episode 9 of the 5 more board games leaving the library series. These are all games that left our library for a variety of different reasons, and we'll talk about them here. If you have any questions or comments about these games, please let me know down in the comments section of this video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. All that being said, let's talk about 5 more board games that are leaving the library. The first game that I want to talk about here is Kitchen Rush. This is a real-time experience where you're going to be using these sand timer workers in order to interact with the board. You'd be collecting these order cards, getting ingredients and different things and putting them on plates, washing the plates after they get dirty, and trying to gain enough money in order to win the game. Now, the reason that this left the library is the fact that it's pretty cyclical. The way that it works is you have orders, you do them, you get money, and you just repeat this process. There's actually not a lot of big choices. The major choice is what order do you think you can finish in a certain amount of time, and that really only becomes an issue in the later portion of the game because that's when your time actually starts to run out. In addition, this feels very procedural. You get this, you do that, you take the thing, and there's no real big choices from there. Time is really your only obstacle in this game. There's no other big choices present, and you just have to be really good at doing those things. Once you learn the game and you know how the systems works, when you play, you're just ticking off boxes. You do the thing, you finish it, and then hopefully you made enough money in time. So unfortunately, not a real-time experience with choices that I enjoy. Now, the replacement for this game that I prefer is actually going to be Fuse. This is a much smaller package, 10 minutes at once real-time experience where you are consistently making choices. The way this works is you'll roll all these dice in the center based on the number of players, and then the players have to decide who's taking what die in that moment and place them on these little minigame cards in front of them. I love this because you have to actually communicate to the players and tell people what you actually want, and then make that choice immediately, and there are serious consequences for not communicating effectively or if a poor roll does occur. I love that it's up to the players to mitigate this based on the choices that they're making. Now, I have an additional suggestion for this one, and that's going to be Project Elite. This one's a bit of a longer, more epic experience, but it also has those similar choices. You're going to be rolling dice as fast as you can, so time is still very much your enemy, but you're choosing what to do with your characters, where you want to push yourself, where you want to move, and you have different objectives that you'll be able to try to finish as well. Do you go for those objectives? Do you try to eliminate aliens? Do you run back as fast as you can to help out another player? And will you have the time to do it? I really enjoy this push your luck mechanism if you're looking for something in the more of that same similar decision space and time frame as Kitchen Rush. So those are my 2 suggestions as replacements for Kitchen Rush, but not in our library anymore. That one is already sold. Fantastic. Our next game here is going to be Canvas. So Canvas and its expansion, Canvas Reflections, both entered our library and left pretty quickly. Throughout the game of Canvas, you're going to be trying to match the symbols on the different cards you collect to the different scoring criteria, and here is where the game misses its mark for me. The gameplay is very simple. You're going to take a card from the available area to your hand, or you construct a painting and then score it. However, all of these different symbols are all accessible, and when you play with the expansion, there are even more symbols because there are 2 specific rows of these cards. If you are playing with people who are trying to win this game, they are going to sit for a long time and analyze every single option of symbols and try to decide what is going to produce the most points. And this happens consistently every single time I've played it. The people who take the longest amount of time will win. That's just how it goes. And this game that's supposed to be a short filler game where you're picking up cards and playing these cool paintings becomes something where people are sitting and waiting, and you're just basically waiting until the game is over because it's just not that fun to watch people puzzle this hand. For a solo game, I can understand how this could be appealing, but unfortunately the solo experience is pretty lacking as well. You're doing the same sort of thing, min-maxing the different symbols, and there's not a lot of excitement being generated. Now, that being said, the other issue is the art of this game is very cool, but if you're going for a picture that looks cool aesthetically, you're probably losing. I've played this game with many people, and a lot of people, when they build a piece of art, sometimes they don't score a lot of points at all, and they're pretty frustrated. They'll score their painting, get a little bit of points from a couple of the objectives, and at the end of the game, they felt like they didn't really do much. They're happy with their art piece, but because they're getting trounced by those people that take a lot longer on their turns, it's not a very satisfying experience. So unfortunately, Canvas and Canvas Reflections are out of the library, already sold as well. My replacement for this game is Circle the Wagons, and this has you doing something similar. You'll have some objective criteria in the center of the table, and they each tell how each player is going to score points at the end. But they're also set scoring conditions based on the different areas of terrain that you're grouping. So every single card has ways that it scores points, so taking any card feels good. It brings that similar itch to my end for a two-player experience, but if you're looking for something that's a bit more for more players or has a great solo mode, I would recommend Cascadia. It does some similar things with changing up the different scoring conditions based on the different animal tiles that are in the area, and the turn structure is also light and fast. You're going to be picking a pair of tile and animal tile and putting them into your different wildlife areas. However, whenever you're looking at your options, it's easy to tell which ones are going to be good for you because of the presentation of the system. You don't have to be thinking about those transparency layers that can occur with something like Canvas, so the turns actually are pretty quick in this one. And I find this one pretty satisfying when you're building out and your options increase, so every tile becomes something that you can use. And it's easy to match up the different animal tiles and the areas that they can fit in on your personal board. So if you're looking for something in this familiar light style with some great options when it comes to the objective scoring, my recommendations for two-player are going to be Circle the Wagons, and then for multiplayer and solo play, I recommend Cascadia. The next game is Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down. If you look on the channel, I actually have two separate reviews for this game. The first one is for the two-player mode, which I rate about a 6 out of 10. I think it's a good experience and it's something that I would come to every so often. However, when it came to the multiplayer and solo mode of this game, I thought it was pretty terrible. Not a fan at all. There were a limited amount of choices and the game took a very long time. A lot of procedure and not a lot of fun to be had. Two-player mode I did think was quite fun, but unfortunately the strength of that two-player mode was not strong enough to keep this gigantic game in the library, and because of the way that the expansion content worked, a lot of it didn't work with that two-player mode. That being said, the main reasons that this is leaving has to do with the multiplayer and the way that the scoring happens. The biggest way that you're going to be scoring in the multiplayer mode is by controlling the different areas on the board, putting these control markers down. Now, the only way that you can do that is by taking these conflict actions. So it makes the drafting less interesting, and it means that you're pretty much going to be just choosing the cards that allow you to fight more. And that means that your choices are pretty minimal. You have drafting going on, but the choices are obvious. So not something I really enjoyed. Now, this was alleviated in that two-player mode because the objectives and the actual scoring system changes completely. So did find that interesting. The other reason that I think that this is going to be leaving is the way that the miniatures integration happened. So in the original game, you actually use standees, and the standees have all of the information for your different miniatures. It's going to tell you their stats, their strengths, potential special abilities, but the miniatures version remove those completely. And instead, you're going to be using these large cards that tell you the different stat layouts for the different characters. And that was pretty dang annoying to have to consistently reference from the minifigures to your little reference sheets and do that for each of the different characters. And this even was an issue in that two-player mode, having to become familiar with these different models. And unfortunately, the models are not very clear either. Unless they're painted, it's going to be very hard to tell which model goes to which character. And this is not a game that I'm going to put that time into to fix because there are problems with the other systems. So unfortunately, the biggest barriers to enjoying this is that multiplayer setting and the way that scoring happens in general, and just that miniatures referencing back and forth. It makes this a bit of a slow experience and not one that I'm excited to play, honestly. So it's sitting at a 5 as the mix between the two ratings. I'm sitting at a 6 rating for that two-player experience, and then about a 3 or a 2 with the multiplayer mode. My replacement for Tsukuyumi is going to be Root. It has a lot of things that are carryovers from the other game. It's asymmetric, you have different factions that are going to be scoring in different ways, and you're going to be collecting these large troops and sending them out to battles based on the faction that you pick, of course. Especially with the new expansion, there are even more of these factions that have large armies that they can send out. The big standout for me with Root is the fact that there's so much choice in each turn, with still structure being given with the different characters and the way they work. You're obviously going to be leaning towards some directions based on the factions and the way that they score points well, but each character, and based on the cards that you draw and the different other players that are interacting, you're going to have a lot of interesting choices from turn to turn. There are no easy decisions in Root. Every single choice is a big deal. There's also a great system that shares and binds the different units, and it's easy to tell what the strength of the characters are and how the battles are going to resolve. So I really appreciate the clarity that this asymmetric design brings, and I think that Root does it the best with having such strong asymmetric factions, but with those uniting mechanisms. So that's my recommendation to replace Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down. If you want even more of a deep dive into my criticisms of Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down, please take a look at that other review. I'll leave a link in the description of this video, and I really go into detail on why I dislike the solo mode as well. Whew, there's a lot to dislike there, but I won't bring that up again. The next game is Great Western Trail, and I actually really like this one, so I'm not going to cover it too much here because you'll understand why I replaced it in a second. In Great Western Trail, you play as cow wranglers. You'll be getting all these cattle, shipping them off to different cities, building buildings, recruiting people, and gaining a lot of different points along the way. Now, I really enjoyed this game, but the reason it left is it was replaced with the second edition. Second edition just cleans up a lot of the artwork, cleans up some of the game mechanisms. I actually play this game a lot, so I do notice the changes between the two printings and the power level of certain actions and buildings, which is really cool to see. They've increased the just flexibility of the different characters, and they've actually improved the overall quality of life with these recessed player boards and just a lot of vibrant new art. So I really like this second edition of the game. The reason I didn't want to get rid of the first edition, though, was because of the Rails to the North expansion. I love this expansion. It makes the delivery process a little bit more interesting with you having a new action where you can put these little houses and reach out these new cities. It makes auxiliary actions a bit more stronger, so you're taking a little bit more time on the trail and visiting buildings that you may not have visited more frequently in the original edition of the game. So I held on to the original edition because I knew that the second edition didn't have the expansion announced. But that has changed. They've announced the new expansion here for the second edition of Great Western Trail, and I'm super excited. In addition, this includes cards where you can actually play the expansion as the solo mode, which was also included in the second edition. Awesome, because I enjoy solo gaming, and the solo mode is really well done for this game. So you have new cow variants, new solo mode integration. I think this is exciting, and I'm excited to play more Great Western Trail, particularly with Rails to the North, my preferred way to play the game. Right now, I think that the original with the Rails to the North expansion is better than the second edition, but I can only imagine that the second edition version of Rails to the North is just going to be that much better. So that's my replacement for Great Western Trail, just the second edition, and very excited for when Rails to the North finally comes out. The last game I want to talk about is Cryptid, and I actually like this game. Cryptid is a deduction game that is very straightforward in what it's doing. All players are looking for a single spot on the board, and each player has a clue that corresponds to that single spot. When all the players' clues are combined, it means that it's just one location. On your turn, you're asking about a player's clues, or you're guessing in a specific spot. If you are correct and everybody's clue confirms that you had it, you win the game. Now, the reason that Cryptid left the library is for one reason only, and that's because there's a pretty big skill gap in this game and no real way of changing or adjusting that skill gap. If you've played Cryptid a couple of times, you'll have an inherent advantage over all of the other players. You're going to understand how the clues work better, and it's just not going to be as fun if you are crushing the other players or if you are those players that are being crushed. So depending on who you're playing with, this may be the perfect game for your group if you are all consistently playing it and you're all about that same skill level. For us, this is not a good fit for the library because some people are just going to be inherently better than others, and it's just not going to get picked. It's not going to get played. Now, my replacement for this game is a bit of a leap. It has that deduction in it, but it's more of a hidden movement game, and that is going to be Mind Management. Now, Mind Management has one player playing as the one versus everybody else at the table. They're going to cooperatively be trying to hunt down this recruiter player as rogue agents. Now, they're doing this on this large map and asking for information and gathering clues and using deduction to try to figure out where they started the game and where they moved and hopefully where they can capture them, and also trying to figure out what that recruiter player is trying to locate and find. The reason that I'm choosing this game in particular is because it addresses the skill gap through the use of what's known as the shift system. This is this large box of different mini expansions that you can give to each of the sides to make them stronger. And this is going to be really helpful because you can cater the experience if you know these shift system modules well enough in order to make the game that much more balanced between the different players' skill levels. I love this, and as a player who's played through the majority of these modules, I can cater and customize this experience based on the people that are playing. I love this approach to game design, how the game has that self-balancing aspect, but you can also use it straight from the get-go when new players are starting out. There's a lot of stuff that just makes sense when you look at the different modules and how they integrate, and I love that they're very easy to remove or add. It's up to you how you want to customize your game. So that's my recommendation as a replacement for Cryptid, mainly because it helps cover that skill gap. That is Mind Management. And those are 5 more board games that are leaving the library. If you have any questions, once again, about any of the games that I talked about here, please let me know in the comments. What do you think of the games that I culled? What do you think of my replacements? And if you're looking for any links to anything, once again, a link in the description of this video to all of the games that I talk about here. I'd love to know what has left your library recently and what you think in general about the games that I talked about here. What do you think is going to be leaving our library next? I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching. SideGame Strong